Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again tomorrow, Sunday today, but nevertheless we're going to get our portion out. I'm going to try to give a Deval Torah that will connect last week's portion, which is still not Tuesday yet, so we're really connected to this last portion of Pinchas, Phineas, but connected to Balak last week and then connected to this coming week of Matot and Masai. And I'd like to begin by posing a great dilemma, a great problem that we are in today in the world when we see what's going on with the corona, COVID-19, together with the terrible division that we see in the United States and other countries in the world. Where does this all stem from? You know, a lot of times we see in one family, you'll see people that are so God-fearing and have such ideals of building a home of Torah and light, and the same people in that same family are very, very far away from that culture, and they are postmodernists that want to literally eliminate religion from their homes, and they believe atheism, and they stand for everything that you don't stand for, and that we see sometimes in the same home or the same family. It's a great struggle, but this in reality is a major problem today. We have to just say it the way it is today. Today, we're in a worldwide, global war between two cultures. And here, I'm not getting into the point here, as of course, as a rabbi, as a Jewish person, who believe in Judaism, right? So we have the culture of the God-fearing people in our world, those who believe in our Torah and our way, as opposed to those who don't believe and want to uproot the Torah, the atheistic world. But of course, any religion in the world, not only Judaism, has the basic principles of the morals that the Torah talks about. Because those who believe there's a God in the world, so we have a check and balance. You know, we wake up in the morning and we're God-fearing. We're careful how we speak, what we do. We know that we're being watched all the time up there. And in a good way, that we know that there's a creator of the universe. It's not like we live in fear. It's not fear, it's love of the creator of the universe. We want to do what's right in this world. And that gives you a natural balance, of a natural check and balance system of being constant awareness of how you spend your life. And then you'll have whole other group in the world that they believe that everything about religion is a delusion, the God delusion. And they have two major goals in their agenda. Number one is to war against the family, because family purity, that stands for the values of a true home, a kosher home, a proper home, where a man and woman build a family with children. And unfortunately, that's become a taboo in a way. Why get married even, people say in the modern world? Why just live together? Or, and children, abortion is rampant. Literally, unfortunately, people going ahead and killing babies that could be born in this world. And not only that, much worse, of building homes that are totally immoral homes. The Torah clearly states what's a moral home and what's an immoral home. And today, if you speak out, you're considered someone who has a phobia, because you want family purity, you want a natural home, the way it's mentioned in the Torah and the Bible. You become archaic, and they become the right way. That's the only right way. You can't voice your side of the picture. And it's unfortunate that the real violent ones come from that side, from that extreme postmodern liberalism is the most violent people, that if you don't agree with them, they become rabid and violent. But it's a major issue. So the one, they're warring against the home. And the second is very similar. They're warring against the national home, nationalism. So here, if we see in the world that there's this kind of globalization is going on in the world, they're saying, no, we're one country, right? There's no, when Israel talks about its nationalistic goals of building, because Israel is a nation defined in its nationalism. The Torah, the nationalism goes all together with one another as a nation. So we're like the leaders, the forerunners of that nationalistic view that has become taboo in their world, and we are considered the apartheid and all kinds of other name-calling Israel, and we're always, set up a Palestinian state here now, one little country we have, and all kinds of things that they want to do to try to eliminate our philosophy, our goals, the divine goals that God gave us in the universe. And this, of course, is happening in all of the world. Israel's like the microcosm of the world. So what's happening in Israel, though they're warring against us, it's happening, of course, in the United States today. Those who are nationalistic, the ones who are really devoted to their country, and their families, and they're looked down upon, right? That they are standing for values of their belief of God-fearing people. These values have become taboo in the eyes of these postmodern people, and taking advantage of a situation of where they are literally leading the masses blind, using that for their own personal agenda, which is terrible. So they're using, unfortunately, innocent people for their benefit to try to further their goals, which are poison goals, instead of strengthening the family unit, and which is always all about education. Look, everything that's happening in the world today, all the violence and these terrible things that go on in the world, is because of lack of education. Yeah, everyone has to see that's the problem in the world. There's no good education, and that terrible thing is as a result of not being connected to the values of the Torah values, that God is the divine values of moral values that are given by the Torah. So the Hollywood instead replaced the values. That's the new Torah. It's called Hollywood. And look what's on those movies out there. I mean, it's unbelievable. Violence, sex, crime, everything that shouldn't be presented to the young minds of children that grow up on all this violence. So they want to just imitate that, right? So they have on one hand all these. They get caught up in that world of imagery, of that imaginative world, and it becomes a reality. They don't know how to differentiate between reality anymore. And at the same time, putting on a pedestal all these stars, right? These actresses and actors, they are God, and everyone wants to be like them, right? So it's a really dangerous culture, and that has become the culture that wants to lead the United States. And of course, Western culture, I'm giving the United States as an example now, against the culture that's much more conservative, that really cares about purity of family, values. Of course, I'm bringing it now in black and white. I'm not here to knock. There are people on all sides that are problematic as well, and they have to rectify other issues. But I'm talking about on a general scale. The major goals of the agenda on the sides are very, very, they're at a tremendous, like two bulls that are going at it with their horns here, trying to spare one another, and that's causing all the problems. So this issue, I want to show you through the, as I mentioned, the portions, the three last portions that are coming, the one that's coming now, the portion preceded us, the portion of Pinchas, is that in reality a message here to these to the clash is really clearly stated within the portions, and I want to try to present this to you now. And I'd like to begin by mentioning the words of the Haggadah on Passover, which we say something very puzzling. And it says, you probably remember when I read it, go out and learn from what Laban, from Aram, on the Euphrates River, he was from Aram. And what he wanted to do, Laban, what did he want to do to Jacob? And it goes on, the Drash, to say that Paro only decreed against the males, but Laban tried to uproot everything. So here, what is the Midrash really trying to say to us? It's making a comparison on the Seder night. We're comparing between Laban and Paro. And it's saying something very puzzling, that Laban was a much more evil, much greater danger to Israel than Paro, because he wanted to uproot everything. But in reality, it doesn't make sense. We know that Laban didn't kill anybody. It was Paro that had the final solution, and he tried to, and he killed. Of course, we know the male, the firstborn, and he did a lot more killing and brought a lot more suffering to the people of Israel than Laban did. So what's going on over here? Why is it the opposite? Why are rabbis teaching us beware more than anyone of Laban, of Lavan? Which is very, very puzzling question. Now here we see, I mentioned before, the family. Well, Laban was in the family. Who was Laban, as we all know, right? Lavan. He was the son of Betuel, the father of Rebekah. Betuel was the father of Rebekah and Lavan. And Abraham was the uncle, right? So it was literally from that family, Abraham's family, who Isaac gets a wife when Abraham sends Eliezer, his servant, to bring a wife, Rebekah, from the brother, right? Laban was the brother of his wife Rebekah. It's that same family. We see such two different sides. Rebekah, who's the matriarch of Israel, and the two daughters of Laban Leah and Rachel, right? These are the two other matriarchs. They are the daughters of this evil man. So we see how in that same family, sometimes such great differences, and gets. But I want to, of course, build this up in order, and I want to get back to what we were saying. So we see here from our rabbis that there is this. We have to understand what was Laban so terrible that they define him as wanting to uproot everything. Now, if we go further from here, who is Lavan? Who is Laban? Well, Lavan, I just mentioned where his genealogy was. If we look in last week's portion of Balak, I'm not talking about Phineas we just had read yesterday, but going back to Balak, 2 Shabbats ago, we read that Balak, who was the king of Moab, of the Moabites, right? He was the king of Moab, and he hires an assassin. And who is the assassin that he hires? A man named Bilam. Bilam, our rabbis teach us, it's mentioned by the great Targum Yonatan ben Uziel, he says that Bilam, he was Lavan himself. He was the same person. Now, the Talmud says it was his grandson or his son. The Zohar says it was his grandson. The Talmud says it was his son. Whatever. 3 different opinions mentioned about who was Bilam. Was it Laban himself, or was it Laban's son or Laban's grandson? But it doesn't make a difference because they're all saying the same thing. They're trying to say that it was that same mindset, that same personality, whether it was him or his grandson or his son. Laban was Bilam. Bilam was Laban. And what does that mean? If you look at Bilam was this hired assassin, a person just like Lavan, who was able to use these trophim, right? He had the power of using the dark side, witchcraft. And we know that Bilam was a prophet sent to the nations who had tremendous powers. And he knew how, as Ben Sipor, right, he would bring back the dead and have all kinds of connections to the upper worlds and using the dark side. Bilam was an evil man. And just like, of course, whether he was Lavan or his son. And our rabbis bring down that there were 3 people involved when Pharaoh came along and when he made that decree against Israel to wipe out Israel. So there were 3 that were involved as his wise men that he sought advice from. One of them was Job. Job, when he asked advice from Job remained silent. When he asked advice from Bilam went ahead and said, go get them. He gave advice to deal with the people of Israel, the final solution. And Jethro was also one of the advisors of Pharaoh. What did Jethro do? He ran away. He didn't want to hear about this. He got away from that. So we see here this get together, this union that was made between the great people of the generation, Pharaoh, the leader of the Egyptian empire, Jethro, and Bilam. They were all there when it came to try to find a solution for the nation of Israel was growing and becoming powerful. They couldn't avoid to notice how Israel was becoming great. And the only one that really was able to get away from that, pull himself totally away, was Yitro. He got away from that. Job remained silent and he was punished because of that with terrible, terrible suffering. And Bilam, who gave the advice of Pharaoh, was with him 100% on dealing harshly and killing Israel. He eventually was killed himself, Bilam. But Bilam was Lavan. So we see here again something interesting. He's behind that scenes. Lavan is always behind the scenes of those who stand to destroy and want to uproot and destroy Israel. That was Lavan. That's his whole goal. Now, on the other side of the picture, who was also involved here, is Balak. Balak, as I said before, who is Balak? Where does he come from? Balak, believe it or not, his name means just like Bilam. What does Bilam mean? Bala'am, to swallow up a nation. That's just like Lavan's goal, right? Swallow up a nation. So what does Balak mean? Balak means to lick up a nation, right? It's to lick. He wanted to lick up Israel. Again, this very similar personality. But who was Balak? and this is going to be fascinating when I tell you, it's brought down in the Zohar Kadosh. The Holy Zohar writes that Balak, believe it or not, he was the son of Yitro, or the grandson of Yitro. The grandson of Jethro was Balak. Now, if this is the case, we see something so fascinating. Again, as I mentioned before, in that same home, you have Jethro was able to pull away from that idol worship. As the Zohar describes, Jethro was caught up in idol worship, was able to pull himself away and get out of that terrible culture and pull himself away from that. And Balak fell back into that, who was his grandson. And Balak, what does he do? He hires Bileam, the assassin, as the king of Moab, Balak, to wipe out and destroy Israel. And if we look in the verses in the Torah, it's fascinating. What does it say? You see the similarities of Balak and Yitro and Jethro, but it's coming from two different sides. It says, Vayishma Yitro. Yitro hears what God did to the people of Israel, how he took us out of Egypt, what he did to Paro. So Jethro was listening very, very carefully to the spiritual realm where God, what Hashem has done to Israel, how he brought miracles to Israel and took Israel out of Egypt. And listening very carefully in a spiritual sense, he's led to come to under the wings of the divine presence, the Shekhinah of accepting Torah. On the other side, Balak, it says, Vayal Balak, Balak sees what Israel did to the Amorites. So what is Balak looking at? Balak's focus is on Israel as a conqueror, on their nationalism. This nation of Israel, their nationalism is dangerous. Look what they're doing, how they're aggressing. They're the aggressors, going against against the Amorites, Sichon Melech Amori. So he's focusing on that side again. We see his postmodern views about him, right? He's saying Israel's an aggressor. We don't want their aggression, this nationalistic aggression of Israel. And that's Balak stands for fighting against that side. And that's what caused him to hire the assassin of Bileam. Who is Bileam? I said, Bileam is Lavan. Lavan, where is he trying to attack? Jacob, it's fascinating when you think about it. What is Jacob? Jacob is represented by two sides. Jacob represents the house. As we all know, every one of the forefathers is deemed by a certain name. Jacob, called, when he came to the Temple Mount Moriah, what does Jacob call it? Ein Zekim Beit Elohim. This is the house of God. Jacob builds the house. The house of Jacob has to be built securely and strongly, like a fortress. And Lavan is very fascinating. What is Lavan? Lavan in Hebrew comes from the word also levena. A levena is a brick, right? So what did Lavan want to do? Lavan, his goal was to take apart the bricks of the house. He wanted to destroy the home. He did not want to allow Jacob to come back to Israel, to build his home in the land of Israel, to build his national home, the house of Israel, and to build his personal home, right, his daughters. He said, these daughters are mine, the children are mine. He didn't want to allow Jacob to build the boundaries of his family life with the daughters of Lavan. He wanted to keep that for himself. So Lavan, as I said before, the bricks, he wanted to destroy the bricks. The brick home of Jacob represented the binyan. Lavan comes the same words, right? Lavan in Hebrew. Bet nun, bin, means binyan, coming from the word to build. It's two of the letters of the word to build. So he want to destroy our home, not prevent the national return of Jacob to the land of Israel. To build, when Joseph was born, Jacob was revived with energy. It was time to go home to build Zion. And Lavan was opposing that. So he's opposing the house, to destroy the house of Israel. And two understandings of the house, as I said, the purity of the home, and as well as the national home of Israel. And we see something so fascinating. In the portion of Phineas, we see that Kozbi bat Tzur, Kozbi, that was a daughter of Tzur, talks about when the terrible tragedy where Simon, when the Jews were led astray, and I should really mention two words about this because not everyone will be familiar with it, but at the end of last week's portion of Balak I'm talking about, when we saw that Balak hired Bileam to curse Israel and he tried every way, he had a problem because he kept trying to curse. He offered 42 sacrifices in every direction to curse Israel, but they didn't go. So he said, you know something, it's not working. God told me to bless them, right? It's just, of course, we can mention on the side, it reminds of Lavan. When Lavan was running after Jacob, God comes to him in a dream and says, you don't touch him. Just the same way here, he tells Bileam, right, don't touch it. You will not touch Israel. They are blessed. So it's also a tremendous parallel. But anyway, so Bileam is going out his way to try to curse Israel, and he's setting up, he's telling Balak to offer for different angles, sacrifices, and it doesn't work, right? He built 7 altars, and for different angles it came out to altogether, we know 42 sacrifices. It didn't work. No, nothing going. They couldn't curse Israel. So what happens? Bileam comes and he says, I'll tell you what's going to be at the end of days, what this nation is going to do to your nation. And he's referring to, what was he referring to really? That at the end, don't worry about it, at the end of days, Israel's going to he's going to punish the Moabites for what they did. But don't worry about it, it's not going to happen in your lifetime. And he was giving him advice. What I want you to do now is take the children of Israel, and I want you to destroy the home. Because he knew that destroying their home is what we can damage and cause a plague to strike. And what do I want you to do? I want you to have your daughters go out, the Moabites, to go out and entice the men of Israel and bring them into sin, to sin with a terrible, terrible sin of Pa'ol. The idol of Pa'ol. What is the idol of Pa'ol, Bal Pa'ol? Well, first of all, they had sexual sins as well, but together with the sexual sins, it was first idol worship. And what they did was, Pa'ol means how would they worship the idols of Pa'ol? They would actually sit down and they would empty their bowels on the idol. And that was in front of the idol. That was a way of worshiping. What did that show? That showed, number one, there was no embarrassment. I mean, literally, if we see in the beginning of creation of the book story of Genesis, we see that God, the first thing that God does after they sinned, the first man and woman, was give them leaves of figs. So, right, whatever the leaf, right, he actually he gave them garments to cover over their loins because they were embarrassed. So embarrassment is a natural, when you're building a home, embarrassment is a natural thing, to be embarrassed of what you do. But here, Pa'ol was totally opposite. Here, go ahead and empty your bowels in front of these idols to show zero embarrassment from anything, to break down totally and say everything is natural. If it's natural, it's good. Just do it, whatever feels good. Exactly, unfortunately, that same philosophies we spoke about today, those who are warring against the home. That philosophy of Pa'ol is what led into the sexual sins of Israel, that they fell 24,000 people killed in a plague, in a terrible virus that struck then in those days. And this was the advice that was given by Bileam to give to Balak. Listen, we can't curse them all, but let's damage them. Let's try to destroy their home. Because if we destroy that home of Israel, we're going to cause a lot of damage to them. So that's what his advice was, to literally strike the home. Just like what this Bileam was Laban, right? Or his grandsons make a difference, as I said. The same philosophy of Laban, who came along to uproot the home, the holiness of Israel, the house of Israel, and not allow Israel to reach its purity, which brings us our blessing. As it says, Bileam himself says, "Mat tovu ohalecha Yaakov," how good are the tents of Jacob. Mishkanotecha, right? Talks about the home. How when Israel set up tents, they were so modest that one tent was not next to the other, so they couldn't look inside and see what's going on in someone else's home. Modesty is a way of Jacob. That is the way we have to live. But they try to destroy that by enticing the young men to bring them down, to show that they can fall into this idol worship pattern. So that is the battle of Lavan and Balak. This is what Balak used that advice. Now Balak takes the advice of Bileam, and he actually, it says in this week's portion, we just read in Phineas, Kozbi bat Tzur. Who was Tzur? Tzur, Kozbi was a Midianite, right? The Midianite girl. She was the daughter. Tzur is another name our rabbis teach us of Balak. Balak was really a Midianite. And he, as I mentioned before, because Balak comes from Jethro, so he was from Midian. He ended up being king at that time of Moab, but he was from Midian. And what does Balak do? He wanted to set an example. So he takes his own daughter and he has her lead the way of sinning with the head of the tribe of Shimon, right? And which is fascinating. Why Shimon, all the tribes? But what I tell you before is that Jethro heard, Yitro, who was the grandfather of Balak, he was able to hear the voice of God. Shimon in Hebrew comes from the same words, Shema, to listen, to hear. Interesting that here Shimon fell with that, with what he's supposed to rectify, to listen. He didn't listen and he fell into he was enticed, unfortunately, by the daughter of Balak. They're warring against the purity of the home, to destroy home with the sexual offenses. And this idol worship we spoke about, these terrible things would bring people down and bring it away from the true family of purity. This is the battle that took place with Peor, with Midian, with Balak, with Bilam. All these forces are playing here. And out of those forces, I said before, Jethro is able to pull himself away, where his grandson is not. We see the clash within that same family. Or Lavan and Biliam on one side, and the daughters of Lavan. The daughters, Leah, right, and Rachel, they were able to pull away from that and not be part of that. So we see the battle on the inside of the family. It's all about the family. And it's all about coming back to the land of Israel. As I showed you before, that's what Laban wanted to do. Prevent Israel from returning to the land, from setting up our national home in the land of Israel. When Joseph is born, when Sion is born, Zion is coming to life. They want to present, they're going against Zionism as racism, right? That's what they say. Fighting against that whole concept of Israel coming home, building our national home, building our pure spiritual home. This clash, as we see, as I mentioned before, is really today, this is the agenda of the postmodern world, versus those who are showing that love for the family home, that love for their countries. And that is the battle today. We have to realize, what is the answer? How do we win the battle? At the end of the day, Lavan is not successful, right? He tries, he can't do it, God stops him. And as we mentioned before, God stopped the same way, Biliam, we said before, right? The parallel, God stopped them both. They couldn't touch Israel. Israel is indestructible. They can't destroy Israel anyway. But unfortunately, they can try to do damage by interfering with our home on a personal level, because there's a national scale, which is indestructible, but a personal level, unfortunately, that is where they can damage. They can damage the personal homes. And that's why it's so important. What is the answer for these personal homes? Is education. People have to learn that only through the light of Torah, only through educating our children and our grandchildren and ourselves, through the morals of Torah, which are everlasting morals which are proven time and time again to be the true morals. And only if you follow the morals that are divine, we will bring true justice to society, blessing to society. And when we let the values of Torah lead the way and be a lighthouse for all of us, and not let those values of Hollywood try to replace those values. And this is really the answer. We have to focus on education. We have to focus on Torah study and strengthen all those who are leading that direction, to stand out, not to be bashful, to stand out for what's right, to be bashful, not to do, God forbid, the wrong things, to be fallen to those terrible things that they weren't embarrassed about people anymore. Losing what it is means an embarrassment. What happened to modesty in the world today? That you should be bashful to, but not to be bashful when it comes to stand up for what is right and what is wrong. And that's exactly what Phineas did. Phineas stood up as a zealous act, which he stood up for, feeling broken. He couldn't take it anymore what was going on. It led to that zealousy. That he said, I want to give all that energy into the love of justice and truth in the world, and not allow that terrible situation to go on in the world, this terrible destruction. And then he gets up, and what he did was his act of zealousy. And of course, to act zealous, you have to be at such a high spiritual level that no one but one person in that generation was able to do it. You have to be at such a high level to prove that his motives were 100% pure in that act of zealousy. They were a very rare thing. And when he went to ask Moses, should I behave? What should I do? Moses said, if you feel this way, you have to do it yourself. No one's going to do it for you. But that was because he was saying it's an exception. And not only that, you don't even go ahead and tell someone that that's the law, because it's such a very unusual level. But that level teaches us that we should be zealous in our lives, in our stage. When things go wrong in the world, we should be zealous in a positive way. Today, obviously, we're not living in a time where violence is the answer. Violence is not the answer today. We have to work on showing the world through education, love and peace, through how the world could live in a much better way if they would follow the light of the Torah. And that is really our generation's goal. Every generation has a different light, and that's the light for our generation. through love and kindness to show the way, not through the old, again, the thrill is time. There are different historical times, and what was right for certain times doesn't necessarily make it right for now. We have to focus on today. Our rabbis have taught us that through love and kindness we can bring back and turn people around to the right direction. That's really the focus in our generation. All the violence is coming today from the other side. Those who stand for these postmodern values are leading violence today against people that again stand for values of purity in others, and individual and innocent people being swept up into that, unfortunately. That has to be our goal, to educate. And we will see, this will connect us to the coming portion of the home. We see how the portion opens up in Parshat Matot about the laws of oaths, where a woman takes all kinds of oaths, and how the husband or the father's involved in education in the house. And we see it's important at building that structure of the home, how we educate, how we speak in the home, what kind of things we take upon ourselves. All this is connected to building the proper family life on an individual scale. And then we see coming up, we're going to read about, again, the national scale again, where the tribes of Reuven, Gad, and the half a tribe of Manasseh who wanted to receive a portion on the other side of the Jordan River. But God is telling them, first, you have to come across and enter the land of Israel and bear responsibility, a nationalistic responsibility for your brothers to fight the battles of the land of Israel, and then you can go back in peace to where you want to live, only after you show your duties, your nationalistic duties to your family. So we see again the home, focus on building a proper home with the proper values. At the same time, your devotion and your nationalistic loyalty to your country, to your people. Together, in this direction, we will be emulating the creator of the universe, following the path that was outlined by the Torah, and that is outlined by the Torah to continue to build a true world of light, which will bring us to the final redemption. This will rectify the terrible violence, the terrible behavior that goes on in the world today, only through the following the beautiful Torah. Anyway, have a wonderful week, and we will be in touch. Shalom, Shavua Tov. Bye-bye.